Picture this, it's a summer evening in Ireland, 1987. You're a mom, you've got two little girls at home, you wave them goodbye and say, see you tomorrow. And where are you going? A David Bowie concert. Nothing sinister, nothing dark, just a fun night out with a friend. You dance, you sing, you're just living your life. And then, out of nowhere, you vanish completely, like the whole city swallowed you up. No goodbye, no final call, just silence. That's exactly what happened to Antoinette Smith, a young mother from Dublin who walked into a night full of music and neon lights and never walked back out. And here's the part that makes people shiver. Decades later, Ireland is still asking the same question: what really happened after that concert? So let's meet the people in this story because the names matter. First, there's Antoinette Smith. She's 27 from Clondalkin in Dublin, and she wasn't just some random name in a file. She was lively, full of energy, the kind of woman who'd get up on the floor for Irish dancing and actually win competitions. She loved her music, loved a laugh, and yeah, she was known for dressing up, winning fancy dress contests back in the day. She was a mom who worked hard but still had that spark. Then there were her two daughters, Lisa, who was only 7 at the time, and Rachel, just 4. Imagine being that young and suddenly your mom's gone without explanation. They had to grow up carrying a hole where their mother should have been, and that absence still hangs over them today. Now, Antoinette's estranged husband, Carl Smith. The marriage was struggling, things weren't picture perfect, but when she didn't come home, he was the one who raised the alarm. He wanted answers, and instead he ended up under suspicion. His life was thrown into chaos too. And finally, the guards. Back then it was Bray Garda Station leading the search, with Detective Inspector Seamus Ryan trying to keep the case alive. To this day, the guards still circle back to Antoinette's name, still asking for tips because her killer has never been caught. These are the characters: a mom, her kids, a husband with questions, and investigators left chasing shadows. And from here, the night begins. So here's where it all starts. It's July 11th, 1987. Summer in Ireland, the kind where the big event of the season is a concert at Slane Castle, and not just any concert, David Bowie. Thousands of people pack the place, singing, screaming, losing their minds, and right there in the crowd is Antoinette with her friend. It's one of those nights that feels normal, even special. Music blasting, friends laughing, the kind of thing you think you'll look back on fondly. Antoinette is having the time of her life. Afterward, she and her mate grab a late-night bus back to Dublin. By the time they hit the city, it's around 11 at night. Long day, but nothing out of the ordinary. Now here's the part where most of us would go home, kick off the shoes, and crash. But not these two. Nope. They decide, you know what, let's keep it going. And they head straight for a nightclub, because of course they did. It's the 80s. Nobody wants to call it a night when the neon's still glowing. So the bus pulls into Dublin, and instead of heading home, Antoinette and her friend decide to hit La Mirage discotheque on Parnell Street. And if you know Dublin in the 80s, you can picture its smoky air, colored lights, music thumping so loud the floor feels like it's alive. People packed wall to wall, everyone trying to dance, drink, or hook up before the lights come on. Antoinette's in her element. She's laughing, moving through the crowd, just enjoying the night. And then she bumps into two guys she knows. Not strangers, guys she's seen before. They chat, share a few laughs, nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. Just the usual nightclub scene where everyone's acting like the night's never going to end. But then her friend decides she's done. She's tired, wants to leave. Before heading off, she hands Antoinette her house key, just in case Antoinette wants to crash at her place later. Seems like a simple act of kindness. But it also means Antoinette is now on her own. No backup, no one looking out for her. She stays in the club, keeps talking with the guys, maybe makes a call from inside. Nobody knows exactly. What we do know is that when her friend walked out those doors, it was the last time Antoinette had someone truly watching her back. Eventually, the lights come up in La Mirage. Closing time. Everyone's spilling out onto the street, hunting for a cab, a chipper, or maybe one more adventure before bed. Antoinette leaves the club with those two guys she'd been chatting to. They're all heading in the same direction, making their way toward O'Connell Street, one of the busiest stretches in Dublin. They reach the taxi rank, and this is where things split. The two guys flag down a cab and head off toward Ballymun. Antoinette doesn't get in with them. Instead, she keeps walking down O'Connell Street on her own. Witnesses place her near the Gresham Hotel, moving toward O'Connell Bridge, and then nothing. That moment right there is the very last confirmed sighting of her alive. A young mother walking through the heart of Dublin city, and somehow she disappears without a trace. No screams reported, no scene, no quick intervention, just silence. And the chilling part? You'd think in such a busy area someone would have noticed something, but the city just swallowed her up. From that point on, Antoinette might as well have walked into thin air. Months go by. No word, no sightings, no answers. For Antoinette's family, it's like she just vanished off the face of the earth. Her daughters are still waiting for their mom to walk through the door. Carl, her estranged husband, is left with questions he can't answer. And the guards, they've got nothing solid to go on. Then comes Easter Monday, April 3rd, 1988. It's been nearly 9 months since Antoinette was last seen. 3 kids are out playing hide and seek near Glendew Mountain in County Wicklow, close to the Lemmas Monument. They're just messing around, running through the trees, and instead of a hiding spot, they stumble onto something that stops them cold. They found human remains, and not just anyone's, it's Antoinette Smith. She'd been dumped in a remote, lonely spot in the Wicklow Mountains, a place far from the noise of Dublin city where her trail had gone cold. And here's the detail that makes your skin crawl. Her head was covered with 2 plastic bags tied tight with rope. Whoever killed her wanted to make sure she never stood a chance. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. This was deliberate. When the guards finally examined Antoinette's remains, they hit a wall right away. Her body had been out there for 9 long months, exposed to the elements on that mountainside. Rain, wind, animals, all of it had taken its toll. By the time she was found, she was so badly decomposed that the pathologists couldn't even determine an exact cause of death. But they did have those plastic bags. 2 of them pulled tight over her head, tied down with rope. That was the clear sign. This wasn't a disappearance, this was murder. Whoever did it had made sure to cover their tracks. And here's the part that makes people furious even today. The bags and the rope key evidence that could have held fingerprints, fibers, something were lost. Gone. Misplaced somewhere in the system. Imagine the one physical link to a killer just vanishing into thin air. It was like the investigation was kneecapped before it could even start. To make things worse, suspicion quickly turned toward her estranged husband Carl. The guards questioned him heavily. He was treated like a suspect, but nothing ever stuck. He wasn't even allowed to view her body at the morgue. Imagine that your wife is found dead, and instead of closure, you're shut out and looked at sideways, all while the real killer walks free. After the discovery, the trail went cold fast. With no cause of death, no solid evidence, and the bags and rope missing, investigators were left holding a case with more questions than answers. For Antoinette's family, it was like watching the system shrug and move on. But the thing about a case like this is it never really dies. Every few years, the guards circle back. They put out new appeals, begging anyone with even the tiniest scrap of information to come forward. Doesn't matter if you think it's insignificant, if you saw her that night, if you knew her, if you heard gossip in a pub months later. They've made it clear no detail is too small. And that plea has only gotten louder as time's gone on. 30 years, then 35, now closing in on nearly 4 decades, and the guards are still pushing. Still saying someone out there knows the truth, because the truth is in Ireland, secrets don't stay buried forever. People talk, loyalties shift, and maybe, just maybe, someone who's stayed quiet all this time might finally speak. Just when people thought the case was frozen in time, new claims came crawling out, and they weren't small. These were the kind of allegations that make you sit up and wonder how they were never fully chased down before. It came out that in the weeks before she disappeared, Antoinette may have been sexually assaulted. Not just rumors, actual claims that she confided in someone about it. And if that wasn't enough, there were also reports she was being stalked in a Dublin bar around the same time. Someone had taken an unhealthy interest in her, watching her, following her. For her daughters, hearing this decades later was brutal. Rachel, the younger one, called the new claims horrific. Lisa, the older, said the state failed their mother in life and in death. And honestly, you can see why. If she was attacked and stalked in the weeks before she vanished, then her murder might not have been a random act at all. It could have been part of a bigger pattern that everyone missed or ignored. These revelations cracked open the case again, forcing the guards to look back at evidence, re-interview witnesses, and ask questions that had been left to gather dust for far too long. It reminded everyone that this wasn't just a cold case, it was a case where justice had been delayed, maybe even denied. While the files sat gathering dust, Antoinette's daughters grew up. Lisa and Rachel went from being two little girls left behind to two women carrying their mother's story on their shoulders, and they never stopped pushing for answers. Rachel has spoken openly about how the new claims of assault and stalking hit her like a punch. To hear decades later that her mom may have been targeted before she vanished, she called it horrific. For her, it wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about anger that the truth might have been sitting there all along, hidden under layers of silence. Lisa, on the other hand, has been crystal clear in her criticism. She said the state failed their mom, failed her in life, and failed her in death. And when you think about it, she's not wrong. Missing evidence, no arrests, no closure. The system dropped the ball, and a family was left broken because of it. Every anniversary, every appeal, they're still there. They give interviews, they make statements, they remind Ireland that their mum wasn't just a name in a cold case file. She was a person, she was their mother. And her killer, whoever it was, never faced a single consequence. It's their voices that keep the case alive. Without them, Antoinette's story might have slipped through the cracks completely. Instead, it remains one of Ireland's most haunting mysteries. So here's where we're left. Antoinette Smith wasn't doing anything dangerous. She wasn't living on the edge. She was just a young mother who wanted a night of music and fun. She went to see David Bowie, danced at a nightclub, laughed with friends. An ordinary Saturday night. And yet that night never ended for her. Somewhere on her walk through Dublin, she crossed paths with the wrong person. Someone who made sure she never made it home to her daughters. Decades later, the killer is still out there, maybe gone, maybe hiding in plain sight, maybe even walking the same streets where Antoinette was last seen. Ireland has not forgotten her. Every anniversary, her face comes back on the news. Every new appeal, her daughters step forward. And every time the same chilling reality stares back, you can walk out the door on an ordinary night and never come back. That's the story of Antoinette Smith. The concert, the laughter, the city lights, all swallowed by silence. And until someone speaks, the echoes of that night will keep haunting Ireland. On the night of Friday, September 3rd, 1999, Raynaid Murray left her part-time job at the Sally West boutique in Dunleghair around 9:30. She was 17 years old. After finishing her shift, she made her way toward home, a walk that should have taken no more than 15 minutes through the quiet streets of Glenageary. At approximately 11:20, Raynaid sent a text message to a friend. That message would be her last known communication. Just minutes later, something went terribly wrong. Raynaid was attacked on a short residential street called Silchester Crescent, just a few dozen meters from her own front door. She was stabbed 4 times. No one saw the assault. There was no scream loud enough to raise an alarm. Her killer struck with sudden violence and vanished into the dark. At around midnight early Saturday morning, her older sister Sarah returned home from a night out. Alongside a neighbor, Sarah found Rayanade's body lying behind a hedge close to their driveway. The scene was devastating. Despite the violence of the attack, Rayanade's handbag was still with her. Her clothes were undisturbed. Her mobile phone hadn't been taken. There were no signs of sexual assault. Nothing had been stolen. There was no clear motive. The murder shocked Ireland. This was Glenageary, a quiet middle-class suburb where violent crime was rare. Yet that night, someone slipped into the darkness and left no trace, except the body of a teenage girl brutally taken just steps from safety. Raynade Murray was not the kind of girl you forget. She was 17, a final-year student at Holy Child Community School in Salinagan. Her friends described her as bright, witty, confident, someone who could switch from deep conversations to goofy jokes in a heartbeat. She had a sharp fashion sense, a love for writing, and a soft spot for music and poetry. Raynade came from a close-knit family. She lived at home with her parents, Jim and Deirdre, and her siblings. She had dreams university, a future in fashion or journalism. She'd even written short stories and diary entries that showed insight far beyond her age. She wasn't a rebel. She wasn't in trouble. She had a healthy social life and worked part-time at the Sally West clothing shop. She had plans the night she died, plans to meet friends later, maybe hang out at someone's house. But nothing unusual, nothing risky. That's what makes the case so chilling. There were no warning signs, no threats, no known enemies, no troubled past. Just a normal teenage girl walking home and then gone. To this day, her friends and family say the same thing. She didn't live dangerously. Someone else made the danger come to her. Raynade's body was discovered at around 12:30 in the early morning of Saturday, September 4th. She was lying just behind a small hedge on Silchester Crescent, only a minute's walk from her home on Sidmonton Park. She had been stabbed 4 times, 3 wounds to the upper body, 1 to the neck. The attack was sudden and violent, but quick. There were no signs of a prolonged struggle. She had likely died within minutes of being attacked. But it wasn't just the violence that disturbed investigators. Nothing was stolen. Her handbag was still there. Her mobile phone was untouched. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and she was found fully clothed with no indications of robbery or harassment. Everything about the scene suggested this wasn't about money or lust or random violence. This felt personal, targeted. And yet, there were no defensive wounds on her hands or arms, which raised the question. Did Raynade know her killer? Maybe she didn't run. Maybe she paused for someone she trusted. Or maybe the attack was so fast she never had the chance. And then there was the weather. It had rained heavily that night, a detail that would haunt the investigation, because it meant one thing. Whatever trace evidence there might have been, blood, hair, footprints, was likely washed away by the time Gardaí arrived. A crime scene with no clear motive, no forced theft, no sexual element, and no solid forensic evidence. Just silence, shadows, and a 17-year-old girl left alone in the rain. From the very beginning, the investigation into Raynade Murray's murder was marked by confusion and costly mistakes. When Gardaí arrived at the scene in Silchester Crescent, they did not immediately treat the area as a high-priority crime zone. No full cordon was put in place. Locals walked through. Journalists arrived before key evidence was preserved, and the rain still falling continued to destroy what little forensic material might have been there. Gardaí didn't lock down the area properly. No clear perimeter, no forensic tent. By the time the scene was secured, the damage was done. The timeline of the investigation was slow, painfully slow. Some of Raynade's closest friends and known contacts weren't interviewed until weeks or even months later. In a case where time equals truth, those delays meant memories faded, inconsistencies grew, and people moved on. Crucial potential witnesses either forgot what they saw or no longer trusted the Gardaí to handle it right. Even basic procedures failed. For example, CCTV footage from the wider Dun Leg Hair area, including near Sally West, where Rayonade had worked that night, was not recovered quickly, and some of it was erased or lost due to time lapses. Witness reports of unusual activity around the area were not prioritized, and early on, multiple theories were thrown around without direction: a random attack, a jealous ex, a possible stalker, but none were locked down with hard evidence. Instead of narrowing in, the case spread wide and thin. By the end of that first week, more than 100 people had been interviewed, but the Gardaí still had no suspect, no weapon, and no clear motive. The investigation had already begun to slip away. Nearly a decade after Rayonade Murray was killed, a cold case review team was assigned to re-investigate the file in 2008. That team quietly focused on someone the original investigation had largely overlooked: a woman in her 20s who had reportedly known Rayonade at the time. Witnesses described this woman as volatile, with a history of erratic behavior. One witness even claimed she had once said something chilling, something to the effect of wanting to harm Rayonade, and that statement had been made before the murder took place. According to Garda records later leaked to the press, this woman matched the psychological profile Garda profilers had built in the early 2000s. Someone female, someone possibly known to Rayonade, someone capable of an outburst driven by rage rather than long-term planning. The woman was brought in for questioning but never charged. What's more unsettling is this: the public was never told her name, and the Gardaí never officially confirmed that she had been their main suspect. Years passed. The lead faded. Many believe this woman left the country shortly after being questioned. Some think she's still living under a different name. Others suspect she may have had personal connections that protected her from deeper scrutiny. Whatever the reason, the strongest known suspect in the case simply vanished from focus, and the Gardaí moved on. To this day, no one has been arrested for Rayonade Murray's murder. Over the years, as the investigation stalled, Rayonade's family became increasingly vocal. They had been patient for a time, but as the case dragged on, year after year, with no answers, their frustration grew. In 2019, on the 20th anniversary of her death, Rayonade's brother, Cyrone Murray, released an open letter that shook the public. He wrote, "I am convinced that the person who murdered Rayonade was known to her. I believe the person who did it is still alive and has lived with this secret for 20 years. His words weren't just emotional, they were accusatory. He pointed directly at failures in the investigation. He called out the lack of transparency. He begged those with information to come forward, even anonymously. Rayonade's parents, Jim and Deirdre, have long kept a quiet dignity in public, but their grief has been constant. They have watched the investigation slip through cracks, delayed interviews, lost evidence, and a suspect never brought to court. Each year, Gardaí make an appeal to the public. Each year, they ask for help. But to the Murray family, those appeals sound more like routine than real urgency. They've questioned whether Gardaí were protecting someone, whether a decision was made high up to let certain names fade from the file. Because as the family sees it, this wasn't just a murder that went unsolved, it was a case that was quietly buried, and their anger is no longer silent. In the earliest days after Rayonade's murder, multiple witnesses came forward with sightings that still raise questions today. One account stood out: a woman in a long dark coat seen in the area around Silchester Crescent that same night near the time Rayonade would have been walking home. She was described as acting strangely, pacing, nervous, looking over her shoulder. This woman wasn't known to locals. She didn't live on that street, and after that night, she was never seen again. What makes this sighting more than just a passing detail is what it might connect to. The suspect reportedly investigated years later the woman who allegedly had a violent history, and New Rayonade was said to match this general description. Same build, same type of coat, same time of night. But despite this, Gardaí were never able to identify the figure with certainty. They appealed for the woman to come forward. No one did. And here's where it gets unsettling. The presence of this unidentified woman was known early on, yet she wasn't aggressively traced. No door-to-door campaign identified her. No artist's sketch was publicly released. Witnesses said they weren't followed up with quickly. She slipped out of the frame like a ghost. If she was innocent, just someone walking through the neighborhood, why didn't she come forward when the story broke? Why let suspicion hang in the air? And if she wasn't innocent, then what else did she know? In a case where so many leads were mishandled, the woman in the shadows became just another thread left dangling. From early in the investigation, Gardaí believed this wasn't a random killing. And years later, when criminal profilers were brought in to re-examine the case, their conclusions echoed that suspicion this was not the work of a stranger passing through. The attack on Rayonade was fast, close, and filled with rage. 4 stab wounds clustered high on the body. No sexual motive, no robbery, no signs of prolonged violence. According to profiler reports shared in the media, this kind of attack suggested someone acting out of sudden anger, someone who knew Rayonade personally. It likely wasn't premeditated in the traditional sense. There was no sign of a weapon brought to the scene in advance. No gloves, no disguise, no getaway plan. That points to something impulsive, a fight that escalated into tragedy. And there's another detail that makes the theory stronger: the escape route. The killer didn't flee down the road. Instead, Gardaí believe the attacker may have cut through a narrow garden or back path, one that only locals or people familiar with the area would know. That path led behind the houses, away from the streetlights, out of sight. It suggests confidence, familiarity, maybe even comfort. Whoever did this didn't panic. They didn't stumble into the area randomly. They chose that street or ended up there for a reason. And the emotion behind the attack? It wasn't robbery, lust, or thrill-seeking. It was anger, sudden, explosive, and targeted. Which leads to the most painful theory of all: Rayonade may have been murdered by someone she trusted. In the immediate aftermath of Rayonade Murray's killing, the Gardaí launched what would become one of the largest murder investigations in Irish history. Over the course of the first year, more than 1,000 people were interviewed. House-to-house inquiries were carried out across Glenageary and beyond. Dozens of lines of inquiry were opened. Yet for all the activity, the investigation lacked direction. Leads came and went. Suspects were identified, then dropped. By the early 2000s, the case had gone cold. In 2008, a cold case review brought renewed energy. A small team re-examined everything: statements, timelines, even DNA. They quietly focused on a suspect. But when no physical evidence tied her to the crime, the file once again stalled. Today, more than 25 years later, there has never been a single arrest. No charges, no trial, no justice. Each September, Gardaí issue a fresh appeal. They ask for anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. But the public has grown weary of appeals that seem to go nowhere. The Murray family, still living in the same home where Rayonade should have returned that night, has kept her memory alive. They light candles, they issue statements, they grieve publicly and privately. But for the Irish public, Renaid's case has come to represent more than one terrible night. It has come to symbolize something darker, how justice, when mismanaged, can be delayed so long that it becomes unreachable. A girl murdered in a quiet suburb, and a country that still doesn't have an answer. Renaid Murray was 17 years old when her life was taken. Her murder should have been solved, but after more than 2.5 decades, the truth still hasn't come forward, and many believe it never will unless something dramatic changes. So what's blocking it? Is it incompetence? Gardaí have admitted to early investigative mistakes, crime scene contamination, lost time, key witnesses left unspoken to for months. Is it social pressure? The strongest known suspect was never charged, and some believe she had connections that may have discouraged deeper pursuit. Is it fear? After all these years, people with knowledge might be unwilling to come forward. They may worry about exposure, about the consequences of disturbing a case that was quietly shelved long ago. Or is it something more uncomfortable, a silent understanding among those who know the truth that it's better for certain names to be forgotten? In 2019, Renaid's brother said what many were thinking. The person who killed my sister is still alive, still out there, and someone knows who they are. There are people walking through life who remember that night clearly, who saw something, heard something, maybe even helped cover it up. And so every year the same question echoes across Ireland, especially in Glenageary. How can a teenage girl be murdered on a quiet street and nobody speak the truth? Because some wounds don't heal with time. Some wounds stay open not just from the violence of a knife, but from the silence that followed. She's gone hiking in Wicklow, that's where we'll find her. Back in 1993, Gardaí painted a clear picture. On Friday, the 26th of March, Annie McCarrick left her Dublin apartment, saying she might head for the Wicklow Mountains. Her last confirmed moment was at an ATM in Sandamount just before 11 am. After that, witnesses believed they saw her on a bus to Enniscorry, then later at Johnny Fox's pub, though neither sighting was verified with solid evidence. With those leads, Gardaí assumed she was on a hiking adventure, so Rule 1 became Search Wicklow. And when Annie's own family raised concerns about a man she feared, Gardaí stepped back because he presented a hotel alibi for that night in Dublin. That alibi sealed his role in the investigation, made him off limits, and shaped the case narrative for over 30 years. That was the story everyone believed, until now. Back in 1993, Gardaí leaned hard on unconfirmed reports. They believed Annie was seen in Enniscorry and at Johnny Fox's pub. That became their working theory, a trinity of leads that guided searches in Wicklow's forests. They chased buses, canvassed pubs, and treated Wicklow as ground zero. Today, they've torn that whole narrative down. Here's what Gardaí are officially saying now. Those Enniscorry and pub sightings are no longer considered reliable. They've been formally dismissed. The only undisputed moment is Annie withdrawing money from an ATM in Rainlog on Friday morning. There's no proof she ever left Dublin. Investigators admit they should not have chased wild sightings. They termed it a misstep. It's an astonishing reversal. The man-shaped figure seen at Enniscorry, a red herring, the narrative of a lone hike in the mountains, a nearly 4-decade misdirection. That's Gardaí now captained by certainty, not speculation and investigation rebuilt from scratch. And that's exactly what this momentary reset looks like. This moment turned the case on its head. Gardaí now confirmed that a hotel alibi claimed by the suspect, backed by a third-party witness and accepted for decades, is officially withdrawn. What once kept him off the radar was built on shaky memory and hearsay, not facts. In 1993, Gardaí accepted his word. He said he was in a Dublin hotel the night Annie disappeared. That alibi was never challenged. Fast forward to June 2025, detectives scrutinized the original witness, checked hotel records, aligned timelines, and found major discrepancies. The result? The alibi has been formally discarded. Gardaí now admit the man lacks any verified location during that critical night. That's more than a correction. It's a confession. For 32 years, the case shielded him with a lie. Today, Gardaí have reopened his timeline completely. He's no longer a man with an alibi. He's a man with nothing to prove his innocence during Annie's disappearance. And that absence, it's now the most dangerous gap in his story. For more than 3 decades, the focus was on Wicklow, never this house. In 1993, Gardaí didn't execute any search warrant here. No cadaver dogs, no forensic drills, nothing. The Clondalkin connection was overlooked. Fast forward to spring 2023, the case is reclassified as murder and a warrant is issued for the suspect's old property in Clondalkin. Now, Gardaí have brought in a cadaver dog from Northern Ireland, used ground-penetrating radar and forensic drills, dug up garden soil, basement floors, and drainage pipes. This is a 21st century crime scene investigation, and nothing is off limits. They're treating every tile and every speck of soil as potential evidence. That difference? It's monumental. What was once ignored is now being interrogated because this property may hold the only physical link to Annie McCarrick that's ever been found. By the summer of 2025, Gardaí were no longer searching forests. They were digging into something far more grounded: concrete floors and buried memories. With the suspect's hotel alibi withdrawn and the Wicklow sightings officially discredited, Gardaí turned their full attention to a house in Clondalkin, a property tied to the suspect, a location that, back in 1993, had never been searched. This time, they didn't hesitate. They arrived with a court warrant. They brought in forensic teams. They used ground-penetrating radar to scan the soil. They broke open the basement tiles. And at the center of it all, they deployed a cadaver dog named Fern, known for helping solve high-profile cold cases. Everything beneath that home was treated like a crime scene. The garden was torn apart, drainage pipes were cut, and soil samples were sent for forensic testing. Gardaí weren't just hoping for clues, they were hunting for remains. Because if Annie McCarrick had never left Dublin, and if the man with no alibi had something to hide, that basement might be the last place she was ever seen. While the forensic teams dug deep into Clondalkin soil, another team took to the phones and the archives. Gardaí are now re-interviewing everyone who ever knew Annie and the suspect back in 1993. They're speaking with flatmates, colleagues, friends, even someone in France. Why? Because the man's timeline keeps shifting. They've uncovered 5 different versions of his whereabouts that night, each with conflicting dates, times, or locations. That's no mistake. That's deception. At the same time, Gardaí seized his old phones, laptops, call logs, bank statements, and even router histories from his Co-Meath home. They're mapping every ping tower, every ATM withdrawal, every digital footprint that could place him or fail to during key hours. One lead is standing out. Multiple witnesses now remember him acting oddly emotional and defensive right after Annie vanished. That public row at a wedding, the tense goodbye he gave. These aren't random memories, they may be clues he couldn't hide. So while the earth was moved in Clondalkin, Gardaí were excavating far more. The hidden inconsistencies in a man's story and the digital tracks that could pin him down. For 32 years, Annie McCarrick's mother, Nancy, and her aunt Maureen carried a weight most families can't imagine. Not just grief, not just absence, but the sinking feeling that Gardaí never listened. From the very beginning, they told investigators that Annie had been afraid of someone, that there was a man in her life who had crossed a line, someone who had allegedly assaulted her, someone who would not leave her alone. They named him. They gave details. They pleaded with Gardaí to investigate. But because that man had an alibi, a hotel stay that no one had really verified, he was brushed aside, not questioned thoroughly, not searched, not followed up. Now, in 2025, everything has come full circle. Gardaí have publicly acknowledged that critical early leads were missed, that Annie's family was right to be concerned, that their voices, silenced by assumptions, should have shaped the investigation from day one. Maureen said it plainly. They botched it. And now, with the suspect under scrutiny, the false alibi withdrawn, and the Clondalkin property under forensic examination, it's no longer just a family warning. It's the centerpiece of a murder investigation. For over 3 decades, the timeline in Annie McCarrick's case was built on a fragile chain of sightings, speculation, and a suspect's convenient excuse. But in June 2025, Gardaí laid out a completely new version of events, one based only on confirmed facts. Here is what remains. Annie was last definitively seen at 11:02 in the morning on Friday, the 26th of March 1993, withdrawing money from an ATM in Rainlog. There are no verified sightings after that moment. The Enniscorthy and Johnny Fox's pub reports that shaped the original search have now been dismissed as unreliable. The suspect's alibi has been withdrawn. Gardaí now say he cannot be accounted for during the key window of Annie's disappearance. The Clondalkin property linked to him is now the primary focus of Garda forensic teams. In other words, the timeline has been stripped down to its core, the facts Gardaí can stand behind. No assumptions, no public theories, just evidence. What was once a story of a woman lost in the hills has become something darker, closer to home, and finally closer to the truth. The case of Annie McCarrick is no longer about rumors, sightings, or unanswered questions. It's now about evidence, truth, and accountability, 3 things that have taken 32 years to take center stage. With the timeline rebuilt, the alibi withdrawn, and the suspect under renewed scrutiny, Gardaí have crossed a line they never touched back in 1993. Now they are digging through soil and stone for trace remains, reconstructing the suspect's movements hour by hour, analyzing digital and financial records to place him precisely, and taking the voices of Annie's family once dismissed as serious, guiding testimony. But the clock is ticking. This is not just a cold case anymore. This is a live criminal investigation with one person at its center and a legacy of silence behind it. If Gardaí find evidence at the Clondalkin property, a fragment, a fiber, a trace, it could unlock not just justice for Annie, but a reckoning for how her story was handled. Because in the end, this was never just about a timeline. It was about who erased it and how long they thought they could get away with it. The night he disappeared and the man in black. It was December 8th, 2000. The streets of Dublin were quiet, the city glowing under winter lights. 22-year-old Trevor Deely had just left his company's Christmas party. Like thousands of others that night, he was simply heading home. But somewhere between his office and his apartment, Trevor vanished. The last confirmed image of him was captured on CCTV walking alone near Haddington Road, holding his umbrella around 4:14 that morning. Behind him, for just a few seconds, the shadow of another man appears. To this day, that unknown figure remains unidentified. No body has ever been found. No suspects have ever been arrested. And no one truly knows what happened to Trevor Deely. For over 24 years, his family has waited, hoping for answers. But the mystery only deepens. Trevor Deely was 22 years old, a young man at the very start of his adult life. He worked in Dublin at the Bank of Ireland's IT department. His friends described him as responsible, kind, and always full of energy. He was close to his family, especially his parents and siblings who lived in County Kildare. Trevor had recently moved into an apartment in the Dublin suburb of Serpentine Avenue. Like many young professionals, he was balancing his career, friendships, and the excitement of living in the city. December of 2000 marked the beginning of the holiday season. Office parties, family gatherings, and celebrations filled the calendar. Trevor, like so many others, was looking forward to the festive weeks ahead. But his story would take a turn that no one could have predicted. That night, he joined his co-workers for the Bank of Ireland's annual Christmas party. It was a casual evening, drinks, music, and laughter with colleagues. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested that danger was waiting. By the end of that evening, Trevor Deely would walk into the cold Dublin night and into one of Ireland's most haunting mysteries. The night of Trevor Deely's disappearance began like any other holiday celebration. On December 7th, 2000, Trevor attended his office Christmas party at Buck Whaley's nightclub, located on Lower Leeson Street in Dublin. At approximately 3:25 that morning, Trevor left the nightclub. The weather was cold and light rain was falling. Instead of going straight home, he decided to stop by his office on Leeson Street, a short walk from the club. Surveillance cameras recorded Trevor arriving at the Bank of Ireland building at around 3:35. As he entered, he encountered an unknown man standing near the entrance. This man, wearing dark clothing, briefly spoke with Trevor before he continued inside. Trevor stayed in the office for about 30 minutes. It is believed that he went there to collect an umbrella and possibly to check on some work-related matters. During that time, he made himself a cup of tea and spoke briefly with his coworker Carl Pender, who was working a night shift. At approximately 4 o'clock, Trevor left the office and began walking toward his apartment on Serpentine Avenue. His path took him along Bagot Street and then onto Haddington Road. At 4:14, Trevor was captured on CCTV for the final time. The camera, positioned at a Bank of Ireland ATM, showed him walking alone down Haddington Road. Just seconds later, a shadowy figure appeared behind him. This person has never been identified. From that moment, Trevor Deely vanished. The unknown man seen on CCTV has become one of the most haunting elements in the disappearance of Trevor Deely. At approximately 3:35 that morning, outside the Bank of Ireland office, Trevor was briefly seen speaking with this man. He was dressed in dark clothing, standing near the entrance just before Trevor entered the building. What they spoke about remains completely unknown. Later, as Trevor walked away from the office toward his apartment, a separate CCTV camera captured him at 4:14 on Haddington Road. Less than 30 seconds after Trevor passed, another figure appeared on the footage, a man dressed in dark clothing, walking the same route behind him. For years, investigators worked to identify both individuals. In 2017, Gardaí announced that they had traced and ruled out the man who appeared behind Trevor on Haddington Road.
That person, according to investigators, was not connected to the conversation earlier outside the office. But the man who spoke with Trevor at 3:35 has never been identified. Who he was, why he was there, and whether he played any role in Trevor's disappearance remain unanswered. This unknown figure has left behind nothing but shadows and questions. From the moment Trevor Deely was reported missing, Gardaí launched an extensive investigation. But despite their efforts, the case would quickly turn into one of Ireland's most frustrating unsolved mysteries. In the days following his disappearance, Gardaí conducted searches along Trevor's usual route home, focusing on the Grand Canal and surrounding areas. No evidence was recovered. No witnesses came forward to provide critical information. As the days turned into months, the investigation continued. Posters with Trevor's photo appeared across Dublin. The media covered the story extensively. His family made multiple public appeals, desperate for any piece of information that could lead to a breakthrough. In an effort to encourage tips, a reward of €100,000 was offered for information leading to Trevor's discovery. Despite this, no significant leads emerged. In 2016, 16 years after his disappearance, the case was reopened as part of a cold case review. Investigators began re-examining all available evidence using newer technology, including enhanced analysis of CCTV footage. They carefully retraced Trevor's steps, reviewed phone records, and re-interviewed witnesses. By late 2024, Gardaí reported that they had followed nearly 900 leads. Yet, even after all these years, the identity of the man seen speaking with Trevor that night remained a complete mystery. In December 2024, as the 24th anniversary approached, Gardaí renewed their appeal to the public, asking once again for any information that could finally bring answers to Trevor's family. The investigation remains open to this day. For more than 2 decades, Trevor Deely's disappearance has left a deep wound in his family. His parents, siblings, and friends have never stopped searching for answers. In every public interview, they have described Trevor as a kind, responsible, and loving son, brother, and friend. The pain of not knowing what happened has been overwhelming. Trevor's father, Michael Deely, became the face of the family's campaign for answers. Year after year, he appeared in media interviews, participated in public appeals, and stood at vigils held on each anniversary of his son's disappearance. He always remained hopeful that one day the truth would come to light. Sadly, in August 2024, Michael Deely passed away without ever learning what happened to his son. His death marked yet another heartbreaking chapter in the family's long struggle for closure. Even after Michael's passing, the Deely family has continued to speak publicly, hoping to keep Trevor's story alive. Each December, they gather in Dublin to remember Trevor and renew their plea for information. For the Deely family, this is not just an unsolved case. It is a life frozen in time, a daily pain that has stretched for over 24 years. Even after 24 years, the disappearance of Trevor Deely remains one of Ireland's most active and widely discussed missing person cases. The Gardaí have never closed the investigation. In fact, as technology continues to advance, investigators have been able to re-examine key pieces of evidence with modern tools, including enhanced CCTV analysis and improved data review methods that weren't available back in 2000. In 2024, fresh public appeals were launched once again. Gardaí publicly emphasized that they are still seeking the identity of the unknown man seen speaking to Trevor outside his office at 3:35 that morning. The Deely family continues to engage with the media, ensuring that Trevor's case remains in public focus. Every anniversary brings renewed media coverage, public discussions, and fresh hope that someone may still come forward with critical information. The ongoing international growth of true crime communities, podcasts, and documentaries has also brought new attention to Trevor's case. Discussions about the mystery continue not just in Ireland, but across the world. The case remains officially open, and with every passing year, more people are discovering Trevor Deely's story, keeping alive the possibility that one day answers may finally come. Over the years, several theories have been discussed about what may have happened to Trevor Deely that night. While none have been proven, each possibility adds to the complexity of this mystery. First, a chance encounter. Some believe Trevor may have met someone unknown while walking home, either randomly or intentionally. This person could have harmed him, possibly during a robbery or a confrontation that escalated. Second, premeditated foul play. The presence of the unknown man seen speaking with Trevor outside the Bank of Ireland office remains deeply troubling. Was this person following him? Was their meeting planned or accidental? The fact that this man has never been identified leaves open the possibility that Trevor was targeted. Third, an accident. Another theory suggests Trevor may have accidentally fallen into one of the nearby waterways, such as the Grand Canal, while walking home that night. However, extensive searches of the area in the days and weeks after his disappearance found no trace of him. Fourth, voluntary disappearance. Though rarely discussed by authorities, some have speculated that Trevor may have chosen to vanish. But those who knew him strongly reject this idea, describing him as happy, stable, and having no known reason to disappear on his own. Finally, unknown circumstances. There remains the possibility that something entirely unforeseen occurred involving individuals or events never fully discovered or understood. Despite years of investigation, none of these theories have led to clear answers. The mystery remains, with the unknown man in black still at the heart of the unanswered questions. After more than 2 decades, the disappearance of Trevor Deely remains one of Ireland's most haunting unsolved cases. There is no physical evidence. There are no confirmed suspects. There is no clear explanation. The CCTV footage offers only fragments: a young man walking through the rain, an unknown figure appearing for mere seconds, and then nothing. The man who spoke to Trevor outside his office at 3:35 that morning has never been found. His identity, his purpose, and his possible involvement remain at the center of endless questions. For his family, the pain of not knowing has stretched across 24 long years. Every anniversary brings fresh appeals. Every public statement carries a quiet hope that someone somewhere may finally come forward with the truth. To this day, Trevor Deely's disappearance stands as one of Ireland's most enduring mysteries, a case frozen in time, waiting for answers that may still exist. The story of Trevor Deely is not just another cold case. It's a real family still waiting, a mystery still unsolved, and a truth that may still be out there. 24 years later, one question remains. Who was the man in black? Could you be the person who holds a piece of the puzzle? Do you have a theory about what really happened that night in Dublin? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you know someone who may have been in Dublin that night, share this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more real unsolved cases that still deserve answers. Sometimes all it takes is one new clue, even after all these years.